Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features Fantastic Four number 238, cover dated January 1982. So this is an interesting design for this particular cover. Apparently it was the idea of the editor, Jim Salicrup, and it features Doctor Doom front and center holding a sign. Honest, Doctor Doom is not in this Marvel comic, and indeed he's not. So he's just there, on the cover by way of advertising the issue, which is a strange one. And then of course you have artist-writer John Byrne's self-portrait there down in the bottom corner holding up another sign, but you will find out the startling secret of Frankie Ray. So that was promised in the previous issue, plus a dramatic development in the life of the Thing. So a bit more mystery about that, and it is a fairly dramatic development at the end of this issue. There's the signature there, John Byrne. He's inked by Terry Austin, so his collaborator over on Uncanny X-Men on that seminal run. But there's a little note there telling us that Austin is the guest inker of a story in this crazy book, because the comic is divided into two different stories. I suppose they're chapters of the same issue, and there's a pin-up. So 22 pages of story and art in this issue, plus the pin-up. Let's open this one up to the splash page, and this does pick up from a scene in the previous issue. Title of the story there, The Lady Is for Burning, and the creative team down here at the bottom of the splash. John Byrne words and pictures, Jim Novak lettering, Bob Sharon coloring, and there you go. So Byrne inking his own pencils in this first story, which is 13 pages long. And you can see Johnny's gotten up out of his chair in shock. And she asks him, Frankie, do you see it, Johnny? Please tell me you can see it too. So it's this costume that she's wearing, this gold swimsuit, it seems. That's just it, Johnny. I don't know what it's for, she says to him. I don't even know where it came from. So let's find out a little bit more. We're going to learn finally the back history and story of Johnny's girlfriend, Frankie Ray. So he asks her, like, you don't know where it came from, this is very weird. And she says here, Johnny, please, it's no joke. I've been almost out of my mind for nearly a month, catching glimpses of this thing in mirrors, in store windows, wondering if I was going mad. Can't you see, Johnny? Can't you tell by looking at it? This isn't just a costume. It's like my own skin. It won't come off. And so there's this whole deal that when she's wearing any other form of clothing, like her robe, the costume disappears. It's as if it's absorbed into her skin, she says. So Johnny's baffled. And then when she removes the robe, she says, all I have to do is take off my robe again, and it reappears instantly. So that is all pretty bizarre. Now, of course, it does raise questions about using the bathroom, does it not? In any case, Johnny there comforts her, says, let's go talk to Reed about things. She's there wondering about where they were. You got a recorded message saying the Fantastic Four were temporarily unavailable, but you must have some idea, Frankie, some notion of where this thing came from. So now she begins to talk about her past history. So we're learning this for the first time here. And we have the classic device of the curved edge for the borders of panels that are flashback panels. So she talks about her earliest memory was when she was 14, and she woke up in a dingy warehouse naked under an old lab coat. And she says, I suppose now that I only thought I was naked, probably I was wearing this costume even then. I remember feeling monstrously hungry, she says, as if I hadn't eaten in days. And then when I made my way back to where I thought I lived, it was deserted, stripped to the walls. I could find no trace of my former life. I knew my name was Frankie Ray, and the name on the mailbox confirmed my father was Thomas Ray. And in that mailbox I found an envelope addressed to me and containing $1,000. Every week after that, another envelope would come, always with a different postmark and always with money enough to live on. So Jonny's there, aghast, and you never question where it was coming from. And she replies, "It just never occurred to me. It was as if something deep in my mind was compelling me not to just accept." It went on like that for almost 6 years. Then one day the money stopped. So that brings her up to the age of 20, which is presumably what she is now. That was just before that night at the last disco club, the night I first saw you. And she says, "I was attracted to you from the start, then I realized who you were, and my fear of fire turned that attraction into almost a revulsion." So this is an explanation of why she so hated Jonny when he would flame on. And she continues here and says, yet it was as if I'd somehow found a part of myself I hadn't even known was missing. I found myself irresistibly drawn to you, drawn to the Human Torch. So Jonny tells her, you got to keep pushing yourself to try and remember everything. And she says, it feels as if my head is going to explode. So Jonny's encouraging her, and then she starts to flame here, as if she's about to catch fire. And we do get a really good page turn on this one after the ads. So this is the big revelation regarding Frankie, and it's this. Look at her. So she has the ability to flame on. Plus, when she does it, she remembers all about her past, and she flies out of the rooftop of the apartment building. And Jonny's there, really in shock. She flamed on, but that's impossible. I'm the only one who can still do that. Now, that's a very interesting phrasing. So in his mind, he is phrasing the thought with reference to the old Human Torch that was a Golden Age superhero. So he knows about that. And then he flames on himself, and up he flies going after Frankie. Really like this panel too. Byrne really giving a good implication of these flaming, flying superhero characters flying around the skyscrapers of Midtown Manhattan. It's really, really well done. And Frankie there says to Jonny when he tells her to slow down, "Why? I'm free, Jonny. I know who and what I am. I'm free." So he thinks to himself, free? What the heck is she talking about? Can't worry about that now. At least I know it's still Frankie. I can still talk to her. So he does that. He says, "I don't know what this power of yours is exactly, but something tells me this is the first time you've really cut loose with it. Please go slow. Be careful. You don't know how much trouble you could get into." So she's not really paying much mind to him, and then he precisely pulls her back before she was going to fly into a massive billboard. Really like the perspective on this. Whatever this is, you can just see the lettering there, buy. So is it shampoo that's being sold? Something like that, but it's a really interesting angle that Byrne has pulled off on the billboard. And I'd say he gridded that out in order to get the implication of a flat face at this angle on the billboard. It's a really nice panel in any case. So then Jonny says, "Now will you do as I ask and take it slow and easy? I know just what you're feeling, Frankie. I felt it myself when I first became the Human Torch. There's no sensation in life to match the feeling of flying all by yourself just by thinking it. But you got to learn how to fly, what to watch for, how to steer yourself. It took me weeks." So she says she'll pay attention, and he starts giving her some lessons. So this is interesting from Byrne, thinking through the physics of the Human Torch flying around. And this is what he comes up with for Jonny to alert Frankie to. Try to keep straight and level. Judge the wind currents, the thermal pockets that can push you off course. So she begins to get it, and then she talks about what she's remembered. She remembers her father. "He was my stepfather, really," she says. "He'd married my mother quite late in his life. I was only a baby. Then mother died. Not long after they'd married. I know he felt trapped then with having to take care of an infant daughter. But he was a good man, Jonny. Sometimes he drank too much, as if he was trying to forget something, some very old wound." Now this is interesting that he's given Frankie Raye this origin, that her father was her stepfather, because if you look again at the cover, you can see that Byrne there is wearing a wedding ring on his left hand. So this is the point that he was married to a woman, Andrea Braun, who he met at a comics convention, and he became himself a stepfather then to Kieran Dwyer, the artist, the comics artist, and he helped the boy with his, his drawing and acquiring the skills to be a comic book artist in his own right. So kind of interesting that he's maybe using his own life experience now as a stepfather, transformed and reconfigured for the story of Frankie Raye. So you can see her stepfather there reading an issue of the Daily Bugle where the front page story is about the Fantastic Four, and he becomes all upset. The Human Torch, he dares to call himself the Human Torch, but he's not. The Torch is dead, says the man. And Frankie's confused, and the man continues, my poor Torch is dead, but he can live again. We can make him live again. So they drive off to this warehouse. To my amazement, my stepfather produced a key to one of the rusted padlocks, and we went in. So the man says, it's still here, all my equipment, my chemicals. The government impounded them, said the torch was too dangerous, said they couldn't permit me to continue my experiments. So all his equipment is there. Yes, everything is here. They forgot about it, you see, lost in all the paperwork of World War II. Even my precious molds left to rust. Fools, they could have had an army of torches to battle the Nazis. So they're carting some of this material around, and then Frankie's foot goes through the floor, and one of these big barrels that she's hefting across the floor falls back on her, and she's engulfed in flame. That's really well depicted here by Byrne in the pencils and inks. So the stepfather's aghast, of course. Let's turn the page, and that's the origin of her having the ability to flame on like Jonny. So, Daddy grabbed an old smock, she tells Jonny, and put it over me. But even though I was obviously all right, he looked worried. And more than that, he looked frightened. He said then that he wanted to hypnotize me, to open my mind in order to see if there was any psychological damage. I trusted him, I agreed. He hypnotized me all right, but so that he could put blocks on my memory, make me forget what had happened, forget the fire, fear fire. And all the time he kept apologizing, saying how sorry he was for what he had done to me. I just didn't understand then. Almost a year later, a package came for me. Inside was this costume and a cassette recorder. The tape message was from my father using a code word he'd planted in my mind. He told me to put on the costume and destroy the tape. I did, she says. The costume somehow controlled my flames. I melted the tape, and the hypnotic conditioning was re-established. So there we go. This is the origin of the weird costume and her powers. And Jonny's thinking, it's incredible. If all that stuff about her father is true, it can only mean one thing. Thomas Ray was an assumed name. He must have really been Professor Phineas Horton, the man who created the original Human Torch. We've got a little footnote there from Jim Salicrup, the famed android crime fighter of the 1940s. So John Byrne linking the Fantastic Four back to one of Timely Comics, or the Timely Comics continuity. Interesting stuff from Byrne here by virtue of tying Frankie Raye's superhero origin back to the original Human Torch. So anyway, she's enjoying flying around. She flies way up too high, and so there's not enough air up there to sustain the flame. So here she is, she's in trouble. Let's see, will Jonny catch her? Of course he will. So he catches her there. He says, lesson number 1 for Superfolk Frankie, know the limits of your power. I can fly far and burn real hot, but when I run out of air, I fall down and go splat. Now will you do as I ask and let me help you learn how to use your power? So she agrees, and basically they decide, or Jonny decides to take her to the Baxter building. He says, we have to find out just how your power works. It must have upper limits, and the safest way to discover them is to have Reed examine you. So when they arrive in the Baxter building, Reed has been working with Sue, and the whole idea was to develop her is invisibility power and force field power. So she says here to him, "You were clever to suggest keeping my costume invisible under my street clothes, Reed. After several weeks of that simple exercise, my power has become even more second nature than it was before." So the Fantastic Four training all the time, developing their powers and their skills with their powers. That's interestingly thought out by Byrne. So anyway, Jonny arrives. There's explanations about Frankie, and then she's put into this diagnostic machine for Reed to do his series of tests. That's a nice drawing of her there. Use of a screen tone as well by Byrne. Let's turn the page. So after all the testing, we get the results, and Reed says Frankie's abilities correspond to Jonny's, as would the biological differences between a normal man and woman. Jonny's flame burns hotter and he's capable of greater speeds, but Frankie's flame has a more precise temperature range and will burn considerably longer. "So what does all that mean, Reed?" asked Jonny. And Reed says with a big smile on his face, "I would say, if Frankie's interested, that after a suitable period of training, we may be calling our friends at Marvel Comics and telling them to start publishing the Fantastic Five." So Jonny's very happy with that. And of course, it's a reminder that in the Marvel Universe, there is a Marvel Comics, and they do publish, this was all established in Stan Lee and Jack Kirby's run on Fantastic Four, they do publish comics of the Fantastic Four and their real adventures. But elsewhere in the Baxter building, we've got the Thing. He's lugging this huge crate around, and he walks in on the Human Torch and Frankie Ray kissing, and of course he is flabbergasted. But then at the end of this kind of story, we get an interlude, and this interlude takes place in Benson, Arizona, and we have a doctor here who has done an autopsy on this corpse in the morgue, and what he says to his assistant and will turn out wife, he says, "No doubt about it, Penny, incredible as it may seem, this man was literally frightened to death." So the sheriff is there. He's wondering whether the doctor hasn't got something more medical-like in way of an explanation. So the doctor says, "Sure, Sam, you can call it a massive collapse of the cardiovascular system brought on by extreme nervous distress, but it spells the same thing." And now the wife says to her husband, "Here, Jake, you know what we have to do?" And he replies, "We don't have to do anything, Penny, but I know what you mean. It's just that it's been so long to call on him now. Well, I can't help but wish there was some other way." So who's being referred to? Well, Penny, his wife, says, "Jake, you know, I've always trusted your judgment implicitly. In the years I was a student, in the years we've been married, I've never debated your decisions, but this is way out of our league. This is way out of anybody's league, at least anybody with special abilities. Without special abilities, the only ones who can help us now are the Fantastic Four." So this is going to get picked up, one supposes, in the next issue. And here we have a pin-up. So a pin-up of Sue Storm in her civilian clothes. And it's like as if it is a publicity photo that she signed here, "Love and kisses to all our fans, Susan Richards." Of course, that's her married name. And yeah, that's really well done by Byrne. So penciling and inking himself. It's kind of interesting to have it on this page compared to this one, because this is the second story in this issue. This one's only 8 pages. The more things change. And of course, the rest of that saying is the more things change, the more they stay the same. This is inked by Terry Austin. So you can see that Byrne's inking style in this early era of his run as writer-artist on Fantastic Four is quite detailed. And yeah, so kind of comparable to Austin's style, whereas later on in his run, Byrne's inking style loosens up a bit. So here we have Sue coming in with Franklin, and she's asking why Reed has asked her to join him, and he says, "Oh, since Agatha Harkness ceased to be our son's governess, we've been unfairly imposing on Alicia to take care of him when we're busy, so I've designed a little something to take care of that problem." And he continues by modifying the construction and motivational circuitry plan for our old Herbie robot. I've come up with the perfect watchdog for our precocious junior contingent. So he brings Franklin over and introduces him to his new babysitter. So Franklin's kind of delighted with it. He says he looks kind of like that robot Uncle Ben didn't like and fought with all the time. So you want to fight, he says to the robot, and the robot responds, "Meep. My functions do not include hostile activity directed against any member of this household." Meep. So, following, isn't it Asimov's 3 laws of robotics? There, no harm to the member of this household. But I wonder then, what about people who aren't members of the household? Would it do harm to them? Oh, and I should indicate that there's a little change here in terms of Joe Rosen doing the letters on these particular 8 pages. And let me just check and see, was Bob Sharon the colorist of the first story? Yes, he was. But Joe Rosen coming on as letterer for this second story in the issue. So let's see here. Sue says, "That's going to babysit our son. Don't you think its manner of speech is a bit mechanical, Reed? I don't want Franklin to grow up talking like Webster's new collegiate dictionary." So Reed responds, "Not like me, you mean? Don't worry, Sue. The robot is now operating in its primary language cycle, but the programming is open-ended. It will adjust to Franklin's own speech idioms at the same time instructing him in proper grammatical usage." But it looks like Franklin's just having fun with the robot anyway. And I do like the little detail of the meep sound being upside down, the speech balloon being upside down and the lettering upside down, even as the robot has turned upside down to amuse Franklin. But just then, the thing arrives with Alicia Masters, and he's shocked to see who he thinks is Herbie. So he aims a punch at it. He's back, don't worry, everybody will smash him. But Sue uses her force field to pull him back from smashing the robot. Like this little kind of face-off between them as well in this particular panel. That's pretty good. And Reed explains, "Let me see if I can possibly resurrect your previous frivolity, Ben. I'm glad you and Alicia dropped by just now. I have a very special surprise for you." Okay. So the thing is himself surprised from, and he says, "From a surprise from Mr. Doom and Gloom himself." What kind of surprise? So Reed replies, "Something I've been promising you for many years, Ben, but have only recently discovered the means to deliver." And of course, this is coming in the wake of the anniversary 236 issue, where the thing was able to experience life seemingly in his original body in Littleville and live a normal life with Alicia. So Reed has been working in a secret laboratory on a mechanism which will cure the thing. So that's really interesting. And you see it all here, Byrne technology. Now this is an interesting page. No backgrounds on this page, but the space is established, so we don't need the backgrounds. But obviously this is a way for Byrne to save some time. And intriguing too, that he has Terry Austin inking his pencils as well. And again, that's another time saver device in order to get this issue off to the printers in time. So there's a little bit of a debate here, and the thing is somewhat skeptical. He says, "What did you think, Reed, that I'd be turning handstands? I've heard it all before, pal, and I'm still a rocky orange monster." So Reed explains, "I know I've failed you in the past, but this time I'm sure I've correlated all the data on my past failures, all the medical readings I've taken over the years, every scrap of information I have on your metamorphosis. I know more at this moment, about the precise mechanics of your condition than I ever have, how and why it happened, the exact frequencies and wavelengths of the cosmic waves that triggered it. And that is why I can promise that this time it will work permanently." So, The Thing here turns to Alicia. Well, Alicia, do you want me to give it a try? Are you tired of being the sweetheart of a freak? And so she protests and she says, Ben, please don't say that. I've never thought of you that way from the first moment we met. I've thought only of your nobility, your kindness. And then he says to her, that ain't really what I'm asking. All the years I've known you and loved you, I ain't never been able to shake one feeling. The feeling that it's really the thing you love, not Ben Grimm. And that was a thought that went through his head in the previous issue. So she says, what? That's absurd, Ben. It's you I love. I don't care what form you wear. So Reed, anyway, isn't really picking up on any of that. He basically moves the Thing towards the machine. And the Thing says, all right, just don't rush me. But he thinks to himself as he looks back with suspicion. She hesitated. Only for a second, but she hesitated. Was it because I never asked that before? And if Reed isn't tuned in to the emotional dynamics between the Thing and Alicia, Sue is. Poor Ben, she thinks. His life has been touched by so much tragedy. He can't accept something good when it finally happens. He's worried before that he might lose Alicia if he reverted to normal. How sad. And yet something in her face just then, it's so difficult to read her eyes. Is that concern for Ben's safety? Or is it something else? Some sense of loss? So we're not getting into, Byrne isn't allowing us into Alicia's thoughts there. So we're just seeing it from the outside and wondering ourselves. So the Thing gets into the machine and Reed says to him, there, all couplings linked, all power recircuiting units adjusted and primed. When you step out of that chair, the change you will have undergone will be permanent. So we're hearing that word again, permanently, permanent. Stand by, old friend, says Reed with a big smile on his face. All right, everybody, take your last look at the Thing. Could it all be so simple? After 20 years? This is a good page here. A switch is thrown. Ben Grimm feels arcane energies beginning to flow across him. A tingling that begins at his rocky hide and slowly, inexorably, sinks deeper and deeper. Then, subtly at first, the inward trickle of energy slows, stops, and finally reverses. The mutating powers of the cosmic rays begin to creep out of the Thing's body. His form glows and begins to soften. The hard, harsh rockiness gives way to a coarse lumpiness, like the skin of some great dinosaur. And this in turn softens as the colours shift and fade, changing from rusty orange to a more familiar hue. So a flesh colour. And there's Alicia kind of praying, crying, but as the almost human Ben Grimm squints through the shimmering light that surrounds him, so we're getting her reaction there. That's interesting. Does something goes wrong? Of course something goes wrong. So Reed is taken aback. The power interface circuit disruptors, they're shorting out. So instantly he tells Sue what to do. Protect Franklin and Alicia with your force field. I've got to get through to Ben. Got to disconnect. So he's struggling to get through. There's Ben in silhouette in the smoke. I can't see anything for the smoke, says Reed. The whole condenser unit must have blown. But how? Why? Only a massive power feedback could cause. So was there sabotage? Was the Thing sabotaged? What's going on? In any case, Ben is emerging from the smoke. Reed asks him, are you all right? No, he says, no, I ain't all right. So how could things be any worse for Ben Grimm, the Thing? Let's turn the page and see. Oh, once we get past the editorials and ads here. There we go. It ain't ever going to be all right again, says Ben. The brute-like figure lumbers smouldering from the smoke, and Reed Richards can only gape in awe and horror. This could not have happened. All his tests proved that this would cure the Thing. Instead, he faces an earlier form, a less evolved form of his partner. And Reed knows that what he said before holds true. No known power can undo this transformation. This time, it is permanent. So the Thing is back in the original lumpy form he was after in Fantastic Four #1. So he's gone backwards and he's not happy at all. So next issue, more on the most dramatic development of the Thing's career. plus the most unexpected guest star of all. Be here for Wendy's friends. And finally, we get the responses to John Byrne's first issue of Fantastic Four as writer-artist. That's issue 232. You can find my review and commentary on that issue here on the channel in the back catalogue. So everybody absolutely delighted, to the extent that Jim Salicrup makes a joke here. Where is it gone? Oh no, there's one critical letter here. Afraid we have to disagree, Rick. Sue's not that close to her husband in age. Way back when Stan Lee was still writing the Fantastic Four, he established that Reed was in his late 30s and Sue was in her 20s. That puts a good 10 years between them easily. Most people didn't feel we were making changes too fast. It's true that a lot of folks felt uneasy about some of the modifications, like Sue's hair, but few thought so. Yeah, Byrne changed her hairdo, but few thought John was mishandling the characterizations. In fact, most welcomed back the old Fantastic Four they knew and loved. So here's the joke. The joke is in this little text box here. So most people delighted. So he says, you wouldn't believe how flattered and proud we are to receive so many letters expressing your appreciation of John Byrne. However, it tends to make for somewhat boring letters page. So how about more comments on the characters, the stories, the direction of the book, and, well, you get the point. It's not that we don't agree John is great, it's that we're afraid he might shudder ask for a raise. Okay, so there you go. So yeah, Byrne meeting with approbation from the fans for the most part, and yeah, so his run as writer-artist going well, and putting some thought into the characterizations of the Fantastic Four and some drama into ups and downs for them as well. And yeah, it's interesting and good comics. Let me know your thoughts on this one in the comment section. If you enjoyed my review and commentary, please like and share the video. It really does help the channel. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.